How did human create a nation? The community of human developed by agriculture. Revolution of intelligence due to agriculture. The farming made possible to secure foods throughout the year. Farmers stored the harvested grains and built house, and they formed a settled community by farming. The communications in the community developed the human society. Evolution of intelligence through agriculture. In hunting-gatherer activities are based on the reality. On the other hand, farming life requires intelligence based on annual memory. In order to obtain food through farming, it is necessary to take care of the plant until get harvest. Humans became more intelligent as they changed from hunting to farming. Farming brought wisdom to use natural mechanisms. In farming, human actively works with nature. Humans began to dominate nature by using its mechanisms. There, human developed the intelligence to modify nature to suit their own survival. Change of Jomon human physiognomy at beginning of Yayoi period. Changes in the Jomon people at the Yayoi period. In Japan, rice cultivation was started by humans who came from the continent. And when rice cultivation became popular, the Jomon people disappeared. However, it is difficult for humans who came in small numbers to drive out the Jomon people. Even if the immigrants who came to Japan planted rice, at first the Jomon people only looked at the immigrants and did not need to fight. It took a time for the Jomon people to recognize the benefits of rice eaten in winter. In hunter-gatherer life, they directly face reality, so they mainly control their activities in the limbic system of the cerebrum. However, in rice farming, work is carried out 1-year unit schedule, so it is controlled by the frontal cortex of the cerebrum. Changes in the physiognomy of the Jomon people. There are differences of physiognomy between the Jomon people and the Yayoi people. It is impossible to explain by mutation that the Jomon people evolved into the Yayoi people during the Yayoi period of hundreds of years. There is no evidence that the Yayoi people fought against the Jomon people. By changing from hunter-gatherer life to agricultural life, it becomes a sedentary life, and the settled life revolutionizes food, clothing, and housing. Therefore, it is estimated that the physiognomy of the Jomon people changed due to the change in their lives. Improvement of the intelligence that controls nature. By converting from hunter-gatherer life to agricultural life, it becomes a sedentary life, and the sedentary life revolutionizes food, clothing, and housing. Farming work involves manage the growing environment of cultivated plants. The work is actively carried out to the nature. There, they acquire the intelligence to modify nature to suit their own survival. Formation of various communities. Formation of a community depends on the environment. It is known that large ancient civilizations begun in the basin of large rivers flowing through arid regions. But it is a state with a hierarchical structure. In the formation of nations, there are groups of nations formed by horizontal cooperation of community groups, such as the Mayan civilization. There are many shrines. Those are surrounded with trees in Japan. Major religion of Japanese is worship of nature and ancestors. Formation of oldest dynasty in China. In China, it is said that the Xia dynasty existed in 2070 BC. Yu is said to have founded the Xia dynasty and became its first king. His achievements was controlling the Great Flood of the Yellow River. The large-scale flood control will not be realized unless a common understanding is obtained through rational logic. It is considered that the nation was born through these projects. Formation of the nation in Japan. In Japan, there was no need to fight between communities to unify them. However, the community took in neighboring communities and expanded in size. The story of early history of Japan is described in the Kojiki. It is believed that successive emperors known as Jimmu, Suze, Ane, etc. It is estimated that early emperors were initially decided by mutual election. Each nation formed according to environment. Formation of Japanese state in Yayoi period. The size of the community may increase due to the marriages that took place between different communities. In Japan, there is no evidence that states were formed by the wars among neighboring communities. There is no trace or legend of the battlefield that the early emperor of Japan was decided by war. It is estimated that the formation of the state in Japan was due to the Chinese culture transmitted by the immigrants. Mayan civilization by a group of connected communities in the Yucatan Peninsula. The Mayan civilization flourished in Central America from around 2000 BC to 1697 AC, leaving behind monumental architecture, sophisticated works of art, and complex writing systems. There were many small countries in this area, however there was not a state that rules those countries. Egyptian civilization formed in the Nile River basin. In Egypt, agriculture practiced in the lower reaches of the Nile, but the Nile River flooded almost every year. At that time, it was necessary to have a mechanism to adjust the boundaries between neighboring communities. The civilization of Egypt was developed by the necessities. Establishment of a state. Human society became layered structure by division of labor. In a small community, members performed various jobs by himself and lived on an equal footing. On the other hand, the work shared by individuals in division of labor is simplified, and the efficiency of production becomes higher. In order to implement the division of labor mechanism, it is necessary to manage the division of labor. Therefore, rules and systems were created to organize the division of labor. How to establish the laws for a nation. Activities of state are determined in the world of words at first. The rules to control of the systemized community was initially decided by the members. As the size of the community grew, the representatives decided the rules of the organization. Then the system of government was created to enforce the rules decided by law. How myths had been created. In the society of a state, the logical rationality that is commonly accepted by the members of the community was discussed. And meeting houses and temples were built. There, the myth of the founding of the nation was created, and rituals were performed. Many of war was caused by hegemonism. Motivation of the war. When humans form communities, the rulers of the communities eliminate internal critics. Having driven out the opposition in the country, the leader of the tyrannical regime begins to attack neighboring weak states to expand his territory as the next goal of the state. The war between the Persian and the Greek city-states. There was a war for control between the Persian Empire and the ancient Greek city-state federation. When war came, propaganda spread the cause of war, and not only soldiers but also the people fight together. So the democratic city-states had increased the fighting power after the beginning of the war. This war ultimately ended in the victory of democratic Greece. Why? Toyotomi Hideyoshi invaded Korea. The dictator tends to start a war of aggression. Toyotomi Hideyoshi, who achieved the unification of the Japan, aimed to conquer the Ming dynasty. That is, this war was caused by the madness that hegemonism is prone to fall into. Toyotomi Hideyoshi organized an expeditionary force. And he demanded subjugation to the Korea, which was the way to China, but was refused, so he sent troops to Korea. The dispatch of troops to Korea was failed. The modern warfare in which all the nationals were mobilized. Science was popularized, and humanity of mind was alienated. In the first half of the 20th century, there was a debate that science alienates humans. However, the remarkable development of the science that followed overshadowed its claims. In England, where Newton established classical mechanics, empirical theory was the mainstream, and in France and Germany, synthetic theory was the mainstream. Empiricism and logical theory are the two wheels of science. United Kingdom created science by the empiricism. However, the science was introduced as knowledge with priority given to theory in developing countries. Why is all human beings mobilized in modern warfare? Since science prioritizes universal truths, it tends to alienate reality. Japan joined the world of colonial struggle in the second half of the 19th century. Japan won the war against China and Russia. These success induced militarism, and it had tried the Pacific War, and it was defeated. Human beings lose their humanity as living beings due to over-evolution due to extreme informatization. Danger of human extinction due to nuclear war. The atomic bomb was created in the second half of the 20th century, but now it is the weapon that cannot be used because there is a risk of human extinction. The international community needs to recognize that nuclear weapons cannot be used. Japan was dropped an atomic bomb in the Pacific War, and he enacted a peace constitution that advocated the renunciation of war. This constitution should be an example for the world. Multipolar world is reality and inevitability. Multipolar international situation. A nation has its own history. The multipolar world is a reality and a historical inevitability. United States as the leader of liberal countries, waged wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Although the battle was won, the post-war treatment was not successful. One country is hard to rule the other countries. Does the United States truly understand the traditions and beliefs of Muslims? Socialism prone to hegemonism. Russia and China are big countries, and their people are brainwashed by propaganda. The people of the Russia or China leadership are doing politics with socialist ideas, but it is difficult to control individuals with that principle. The attempt of a socialist country to want prosperity is easy to fall into a hegemonism. Science has logical rationality. However, a theory is hard to change the mind of heuristics. How should Japan deal with the multipolar world? Just as individuals are required to adjustment in the social life, Adjustments between nations are required to maintain peace. Japanese pacifism is stated in the oldest written law that was enacted in 604 AD. i.e., hold harmony in the highest regard. Everyone sometimes tends to destroy relations with his neighbors. However, if they discuss things in harmony, things will go well. Japanese people have a tradition of suppressing these individual claims. Japanese has lived with a capitalist economic system and a democratic political system. Conclusion: human communities were formed depending on the environment. Ideographic period. Each community member worked not only for himself but also for the community. Neighboring communities merged in friendly relations. After that, wars broke out between the countries. Many of those wars had the inherent purpose of maintaining the centripetal force of those in power. The modern world wars had caused enormous damage. According to the ongoing arms expansion, there is a possibility of more damage. There are people who believe that Japan should also be armed with nuclear weapons to deter nuclear war. However, many Japanese support the peace constitution. We should stop the runaway arms race so as not to fall into the madness of war. Japan should claim humanism higher than the provocations from other countries. If a nuclear umbrella is needed, it is necessary to install a nuclear shelter. In the unlikely event that a nuclear war is about to break out, we should prepare to reduce damage by making the cities underground malls, subways, and underground passages. Thank you very much for your attention.